Good morning, everyone. My name is Irena Bednarik, and I'm the Vice President of International Government Relations at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. On behalf of Forum Europe and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, I would like to warmly welcome you to the 6th edition of the Public Sector Transformation Conference. Some of you may know that HP and Forum Europe have been partnering since quite some time now to set up an yearly gathering to discuss how we shall shape the public sector markets of the future for them to be resilient, agile, and successful going forward. To do that, we have the absolute privilege to have some of the brightest minds in Europe and real experts on this topic. We have today 3.5 hours that we will spend together, and this time will be mainly articulated along 3 axes. We will start with a series of keynote speeches, and this is mainly due because we would like to offer a scene setter. The European Union is putting on the table over 700 billion in funds for the European recovery, the so-called European Resiliency and Recovery Funding, RRF. And what we would like to understand with the help of our very distinguished speakers, it's from the 20% portion of the investment that is mandatory to be spent on digital transition. Out of this 20%, how much is going to be spent on public sector transformation specifically, and what is their advice to make this digital transition for the public sector successful? So just one minor small housekeeping point. We will have, following the scene setting stage, we will have 2 panels that we would really welcome to be as interactive as possible. The first one will really look at the architecture that will secure a successful public sector, and we'll look very specifically on the data spaces for public administration. Second and last panel will look at a more broader political question and a broader analysis of the cloud markets in Europe. And very specifically, we will look at how European cloud service providers can operate with the existing rules of the game. The 2 panels, as I was saying, we would really welcome them to be as interactive as possible. So instead of leaving a few minutes at the end for your questions, we would really welcome and encourage you to type them in the chat function, and we will do our best to address them throughout the conversation. We have today with us nearly 300 participants, and I think that what is quite interesting is to note that besides the European audience, we have quite some representatives from the Middle East, from Central Asia, and also some colleagues from Asia Pacific. So really a testimony that cloud and data policies for public sector are an absolutely critical phenomenon for the recovery plans of the economies post-pandemic. With no further ado, I would like to kick off the first part of our conference, and I would like to invite to the stage Juan Jesus Torres Carbonell. Mr. Carbonell, a really warm welcome, and thank you very much for being with us. You are the Secretary General for Digital Administration, at the Ministry of Digital Affairs and Economic Transition in Spain. So no one better placed than yourself to really open this conference and tell us more. How do you see the digital transition of public sector? How can European funding help and accompany this transition? Thank you, Mr. Torres, and the floor is all yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to talk in this Forum Europe conference. Spain is making a considerable effort in the digital transformation of the public sector, particularly in the provision of digital public services, data-based decision-making, in addition to the necessary infrastructure and with the consequent investment in cybersecurity. The commitment of the government of Spain takes place through an investment of 4.3 billion euros in total for the modernization of public administrations, combining investments at the general state administration and regional and local administration as well, provided the Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan. The Spanish government has drawn up a series of strategies setting out the process of digital transformation of the country in line with the European Union's digital strategy, including public-private collaboration and involving all economic and social actors in the country. Firstly, the agenda called Digital Spain 2025 identifies a series of actions with a technological priority with different strategic axes on which we highlight the importance of digital public services and the conviction of the enormous role played by emerging technologies with the goal of 25% of Spanish companies using artificial intelligence and big data. Secondly, the Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan sets out key issues for digital process such as citizen-oriented public administration, accompanied by provided efficiency in the processing of process and procedures of citizens, decision-making based on data and their utilization as good practices, support through emerging cloud infrastructures, collaboration on interoperability for consultation of procedures by public administrations, and the Cybersecurity Operations Center, which ensures security prevention and support. And the third strategy, the Digitalization Plan for Public Administration, which has been partially developed with the support of the Structural Reform Support Programs coordinated by the European Commission. Thus, Spain's commitment to the digital transformation and modernization of administrations is one of the levers of the technological evolution of our country. Cloud infrastructure in Spain play a crucial role in activating European funds. Its importance is referenced in a cross-cutting measure for the provision of cloud services, such as the measure Cloud Infrastructure Services, led by this General Secretariat for Digital Administration. It is essential to highlight the key role of common infrastructure and services in the provision of digital services by this General Secretariat. In fact, cloud services have allowed the Spanish public administrations to deploy solutions to provide homogeneous and equal quality public services, regardless of size of the organization, its resources, or its geographical location, especially local entities and those located in rural areas. My secretariat aims to provide the entire general administration of the state with the flexible technological infrastructure necessary for their modernization, adapt to the new demands of environmental sustainability that allow a core digital transition and its consequent reduction of the energy impact. The aim is to implement state-of-the-art infrastructures as a service through a centralized approach for use by all public administrations, state, regional, and local. These services, offered to all public administrations, introduce rationality and economies of scale, and they work as building blocks enabling the development of more complex services. The use of cloud technologies enables particularly the integration of local entities and small entities. For each of the major objectives of digitalization in the laws, such as eID and e-signature, the exchange of information of official registries, the once-only principle, the electronic archiving, and along, etc., there is a solution that implements abstract legislative objectives into the practical reality. For example, the data brokering platform, which is our solution for the once-only principle, the platform for electronic identification services, and notably the invoicing service, one of whose critical success factors was the deployment of a cloud mode solution for all public administrations. The success of the Spanish model is reflected in the Digital Economy and Society Index 2020, where Spain ranks second in the European Union in the Digital Public Services indicator. Everything is achieved through the interrelationship of three main enablers: an exhaustive legal framework which covers all the areas related to the digital public services and that provide legal certainty aligned with European strategies, policies, and acts, together with an intensive normative development in provisions of lower rank and supporting documents. The second enabler, cooperation and governance structures that work and link all public administrations in Spain. And third, a catalog of services for digital administration that respond to the functions defined in the provisions of the legal framework. All of this without forgetting that Spain is a highly decentralized country and that its public sector has a considerable size. The provision of digital public services in Spain, involving the general state administration, 17 regional governments, and 2 autonomous cities, plus over 8,000 local entities, public universities, and other entities under public law. This means we have to cope with the complexity and diversity. This scenario requires a strong cooperation between all the actors engaged, while technologies like cloud computing offer great opportunities to bridge the gap between entities with unbalanced resources and economies of scale. Any assessment of our challenge and achievement requires a full understanding of this scenario and of the impact of any decisions taken. All of the above is the result of a collective and multidisciplinary effort sustained along the time. In fact, Spain has shown a strong commitment in the digitalization of its public administrations already for some removed long time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Minister Torres. This is really outstanding as a scene setter to today's conference. I just wanted to come back to a few points because we will unpack them further throughout the day. So obviously you're facing the challenge of having a lot of local entities. You said 17 regions, 8,000 local entities. So in fact, what we're going to discuss today, it's really the Gaia X model, how a decentralized cloud federation, so putting together these very different entities, a lot of legacy IT, and how can you actually reuse all of this legacy and then basically modernize the public administration? Maybe I would leave you, because you said a lot of things that were incredibly interesting, but I know you're limited with the time today, and already you're extremely generous to come and address our audience. So maybe I would just ask you a quick question, because you mentioned focus on public sector modernization, but also you mentioned that you have a target for local companies to be 25% use AI and new technologies. So there is clearly a connection between public sector modernization and the broader economy. So I was just curious if you had any further comments, because it's a very interesting point you made there.
Thank you very much for the question. We are all our projects rely in the public-private relationships and through public contracts, for example. We are working with our own capacity, with the civil servants and our own infrastructures and technologies. But to go ahead with the challenge of the recovery funds and to obtain all the results we have committed, we need to work together with all the technological, all the ICT sector in Spain. We are currently preparing for all these initiatives and all these contracts, and companies will be a very important part of the solution, as well as the whole society. This is a country project, and I could say even it's an European level project. So we have to count on everybody.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And indeed, it was great to see the vision of the Spanish government. And I wish you a lot of success with your vision and its execution.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have heard from first member states. I would like now to move on to the European Commission, because obviously when the EU and the member states agreed to inject these huge amounts of capital into the markets, the European Commission was really mastering the plan of how this money should be channeled and really utilized. So it's my distinct pleasure to welcome today with us Christiane Kierketerp de Viron. I hope I pronounced this sort of correctly. Christiane is a member of the cabinet of Commissioner Hahn, looking after the budget of the EU and administration. Christiane, thank you so much for being with us, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Irene, and also thank you for making such a great effort at pronouncing a very European name, which is a mix of Denmark and Belgium. So, but also very much thank you for having me here today to discuss this very important topic, because the digital transformation of the public sector is, of course, not only just a top priority for the Commission, but it's also a very specific priority for Commissioner Hahn, as we are indeed the ones who are working on the digital transformation of the Commission. I think we can all agree that something needs to be done if we're going to make this event subtitled become reality, because, as you say, the aim is to see a successful, resilient and agile public sector in Europe. I think if we look at the history of the European Union and its member states, it's very clear that the public sector plays a very strong transformative force for Europe, for how we organize society. And if we look back on the debates and the discussions about digitization in the last decade, I would actually say that the role of the public as a driver for digitization has been somewhat neglected. And that is, of course, very unjustified, because the figures speak for themselves. There is nowhere in the world where we find public sectors that can match those we have in the EU in terms of strength, size, and very importantly, purchasing power. And I'm not here to discuss whether it's good or bad to have a big public sector. I leave that political questions to others. But if we set that discussion apart and we're just simply pragmatic and practical, we can say, well, let's leverage this size let's leverage this purchasing power it has so we can propel us towards the goals, because every year in Europe, we have more than 250,000 public authorities that spend around 14% of our GDP, so that's 2 trillion a year, on buying services, works, and supplies. And in many, many sectors like energy, transport, waste management, social protection, health, education, etc., it's actually the public authorities that are the principal buyers. So the choices we make as public authorities are going to resonate very strongly in the development of the digital economy. And it's not just in the designated sphere of developing tech, it's also in the whole integration of technology into traditional supply chains. I think the other aspect, of course, relates to red tape and administrative burden, because nobody likes to do paperwork, and I suspect that nobody likes it less than our SMEs. And what we also see is that when we digitize public services, there's a huge benefit there. In Germany, they estimate that we could have billions of savings every year from just digitizing the most important public services. So around 1 billion for companies, 1.4 billion for citizens. And I think the good news for public administrations is they estimate around 3.9 billion for public administrations themselves. So to put it short, if we can digitally transform the public sector in an inclusive, secure, and interoperable manner, then we're also going to be successfully digitizing Europe. And that's, of course, we're very pleased. The reason why we're very pleased to see that this logic has been hardwired into this unprecedented recovery and resilience effort we're doing in Europe using the EU budget. Overall, we see member states exceeding the minimum of the 20% of the recovery and resilience plans on digital. And what we're also seeing is a lot of this money is going into the very needed reform of public administrations and services. We also have within the European Toolbox our Digital Europe program, which is a new dedicated digital funding instrument that will start operating in the coming weeks. And with this, we're going to focus on key common efforts in high-performance computing, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, cloud and data. But also very importantly, we're going to focus on opening up direct access to these common assets for smaller companies and for the public sector. And of course, in the digital policy program we came out with recently, we've set out a method to help member states pool resources in these multi-country projects. So create a very agile way of coming together to set up major projects to deploy cross-border large-scale infrastructure and services. On our side of the Commission, we're running this dedicated interoperability chapter of the Digital Europe program. And here it's very practical in the sense that we provide common, openly available interoperability building blocks, and we support the building of data spaces, sectoral digital policy making, and smart communities. So I think if we take all of these elements into account, it creates a very strong basis for meeting the targets of the digital decade. The fact that by 2030, we would like all key public services to be available online for European citizens, as we have set out in our digital compass. Now, I'd like to focus a little bit more on interoperability because I think it's an excellent illustration of the European way of doing public sector transformation, because it's not about providing a single top-down solution to rule everything. And actually, it's more about making a common effort to link everything, which means that we give each department, policy, government, the necessary freedom to develop their own digital environment, while ideally being interoperable by design. And if we look back on the experiences we've learned during COVID, because a good crisis is also normally a very useful to stress test systems. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons from this, things that we see in a much clearer light. And I'll invite you to look at two different cases. First, we look at the experience we had in Europe with the COVID Tracer app. So what happened was everyone started discussing and developing internally. And once they were there, we also noticed, of course, the lack of interoperability. And as a result, the national apps are still not fully interoperable across all union countries. If we look at another business case, the digital COVID certificate, so the EU DCC, we often underline that this was a record achievement for the union because it took 3 months from proposal to adoption. But I think that's only part of the story, because that's just the legal aspects, and they moved fast. But what I find even more impressive is that on the technical side, we were also ready, so that everyone was onboarded in a fully interoperable mode by the time the legislative act was coming through. And that is actually a real achievement. And the difference between those two cases was that with the in the last case with the EU DCC, we actually sat down, we had a political commitment upfront, we want to be interoperable, and then it wasn't that hard. And when we learn from this experience, as well as the last 20 years of having a voluntary framework, our aim is to bring European interoperability effort to a whole new level, working closely with the EU's national CIO offices. And I'm very pleased to announce that this legislative project has made it into the Commission work program for next year. So stay tuned for that. The focus here will be to create a stable EU member state co-creation structure. Stable, yes, but we want it to be agile and flexible enough to quickly address the emerging needs from member states. Because we think that such an effort can only be successful if it happens hand in hand, Commission and member states all working together. And so I'm also very, very happy to be able today to, of course, express a very warm thanks to the Slovenian presidency, to the presidencies before Slovenia for this very precious support and commitment in pushing our common project forward. I also want to give you a little bit of a sneak preview into the new ideas for this Interoperable Europe policy. I think an important aspect, which is much pushed by member states, is the digital-ready policy making, or what we like to call interoperability by design. It means that we accompany EU-level policy initiatives on early stage, and that any proposed law will be digital by default. So here we look at reusing existing tools and specifications and linking systems rather than always inventing the wheel over again. And that's, of course, going to reduce cost and time. It's going to stimulate cross-sector data flows wherever possible. And it will, of course, happen in full respect of privacy and security. The other important area for us is GovTech. It's about improving and increasing private-public cooperation around the technologies for the public sector. We want to involve more startups and SMEs. And as I said before, the public procurement budget in the Union is huge, and we could and should do more and use it to stimulate the development of a strong GovTech ecosystem in Europe, because of our very high level of data protection, security, and trust. This is really an area where we believe that Made in Europe is a very strong brand. And the third aspect I want to mention is collecting, referencing, and making available common interoperability assets, specifications, tools, or solutions. And they can come from EU funding like Digital Europe program, or they can also come from member states. It's going to be open source, publicly available, and we want to allow administrations at all levels, as well as companies of all sizes, to build public services in a resource-efficient manner, and that speak the same digital language across Europe. Because semantics, it plays a key role in all of these assets, literally making partner administrations understand each other without having to give up their particularity. And semantic interoperability maybe best exemplifies the support that we can provide to the ambitious EU cloud and data agenda, so that we together build this successful, resilient, and agile public sector in Europe. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christiane. And first of all, congratulations on the Interoperable Europe making it to the work program of the Commission, because we're all very conscious of how many competing priorities are there. So we're certainly very pleased to see that this is now going to be a focus. One thing I also wanted to maybe build upon, you obviously highlighted several times the importance of small and medium enterprises and European vendors. So just wanted to share also with our audience that we will have later in our panels a number of European cloud service providers, precisely because we think it's important to also bring the SME perspective into the broader debate. So, but maybe just two quick questions. The first one is obviously on measuring impact of the RRF. I don't know if it is too early or if you already have some economic indicators, that could already, indicate the direction of travel with this huge investment of capital in the economy? And second and last question, it's about timeline. So obviously the Commission, had to set out pretty clear and strict criteria on how these huge amounts, huge fundings will be managed. And in principle, we have this 2026 timeline for completion of projects. So just curious, to see if you feel that this will be enough, for delivery, or if there will be delays, how, this will play out. And I guess some people would want to see this injection of capital becoming more permanent rather than a one-off. The floor is yours.
Thanks. So I want to start by saying that I think the RIF is moving forward at a pretty good pace, so to speak. We have now all but one plan submitted. We expect that today we'll have another 4 plans endorsed by the ECFIN Council. And we've actually already dispersed more than 50 billion in pre-financing, where we already have the positive assessment from also the council. So, and as I said, what we see generally is that on digital, it's doing really well. Now, for the expected results, obviously, we're still in the early stage. So what we have is based on forecasting. We have from, I think it was a spring economic forecast from 2021, where we estimated that the implementation of these recovery and resilience plans would stimulate the economy sufficiently to create 500,000 jobs already this year. And that next year we would add another 300,000 people who would find employment thanks to the RF. So 800,000 over the next 2 years. And of course, this is a multi-annual program. It runs until 2026, as you also said yourself, Irene. So the forecast can only give us a sort of a snapshot of the impact in the first couple of years. And the other aspect that's important is, of course, that it's not just about investments here. We're also talking about reforms. And these reforms are going to take some more time to materialize the effect of them. So there we would, come back once we have analyzed and we have all the plans coming through, and then we would of course also be able to come out with more concrete assessments on the effects. What I do want to say is that if you zoom out and you take all of the next generation EU, our modeling shows that we would expect around a 1.5 increase in European GDP thanks to the investments. And again, that is only looking at the investments. We're not even factoring in all the positive impact of the structural reforms. Then on the timing, it's always a good question. I think I want to start by saying that, for us, it's really important that we show a high level of diligence, but also that we engage in dialogues with member states in the preparations of these plans, because it is a very complex exercise if you think about it. One thing is you need to plan investments years into the future, but you also need to plan reforms. And for those, of course, they require political dialogue at the national level. Often it's not just the government deciding everything itself. There's a whole political process in it. And on top of that, we have, of course, to make sure that the investments proposed, they do not do significant harm to environment and climate. We want them to be cost efficient, etc. So yeah, it is a lengthy process, but I must say, I think compared to what we see on many other programs, we're moving at very high speed here. And the important thing is, I would say it's also that, when you build a house, you have to make sure that the foundation is proper, because otherwise you can build a super fast house, but it's not going to last. And what we're doing here is that, of course, we're taking the time to make sure that the investments will be built on a really good foundation. And yes, it is ambitious to make it to 2026. I think we can all agree on that. But for us, it's also important that the money is spent well, and that the money is spent in a manner where it really has effect. So voila, I think that's what I want to say. But again, we're not, of course, agreeing to plans which are not realistic either. So we do assess also whether it's realistic to go through. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christiana. And I think your point on reforms, structural reforms to make the investments sustainable in their effects in the future is really critical. This was incredibly insightful. I would like to warmly thank you again for being with us, and a lot of success with Interoperable Europe and your other projects you're leading on. Thank you. All right, so we have heard from the Spanish government, we have heard from the European Commission, and I would like now turn to industry. So how does industry regard the upcoming reforms and injection of capital? And what is the potential? So are we really at a moment of European renaissance in this post-pandemic time? So to discuss this, I would like to welcome on stage Gilles Thibault. So Gilles, thank you for being with us and a very warm welcome.
Good morning.
Gilles is the Managing Director and the Senior Vice President of Global Sales for Northern and Western Europe at HPE. So, Gilles, well, first of all, I would like to thank you because you consistently are bringing your vision as innovator and tech leader, benefiting from several decades of your experience in the digital sector. So maybe today what I would like to welcome is your thoughts on how the resilience plans can support public sector modernization, and obviously looking at investments in digital in particular. Gilles, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good morning and welcome everyone. So obviously, because of the extraordinary crisis that we've been facing for nearly 2 years now, Europe has taken a number of unprecedented actions to ensure collective resilience. And for the first time in its history, the member states have agreed to pool common debt at the EU level. And as we've heard, the Council and the Commission have decided for a 750 billion stimulus package, the Next Generation EU program. Through this program, the Commission is not only trying to secure its economic recovery, but it also aims at accelerating its green transition. And it's also a once-in-a-generation opportunity to propel Europe towards the next digital decade. Digital is the make or break issue, according to President von der Leyen's own words. The obligation to spend 20% of the funding on digital investment reflects the crucial role of technology to shape Europe's future. Now, as Christian has just explained, the public sector digitalization is one of the flagships of the EU's Recovery and Resilience Facility. The European government's digitalization efforts have already come a long way, from the initial steps of the Malmö Declaration on e-government in 2009 to the 2020 Berlin Declaration on Digital Society and Value-Based Digital Government. Still, I think we can all agree that the public sector digital transformation is far from finished. We believe that it can achieve a new level by activating 3 levers: data and cloud services, connectivity, and skills. While a lot of the focus of the public sector digitalization has been put on making its services more convenient, more accessible, and cheaper, new innovative solutions are emerging. Indeed, for years now, governments have been collecting massive amounts of data in terms of weather forecasting, healthcare, mobility, data that cannot be exploited thanks to the rise of artificial intelligence and the virtually unlimited computing capacity that we've got at our disposal. But in order to unleash this potential, national resilience plans should make sure a significant effort is made to accelerate the secure data sharing, processing, and use between public institutions. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, the EU governments had undertaken sovereign cloud initiatives in line with the EU data strategy. The stakes are high as we need to avoid an over-reliance on the public cloud providers in order to keep control over the use of our personal and corporate data while taking advantage of the huge economic potential of the cloud in Europe. A wider uptake of homegrown cloud services will be key to the member state sovereignty in the digital decade. We do believe the GAIA-X Foundation can help with this. The GAIA-X Foundation is building the next generation of trusted data infrastructure that will drive a broader adoption of cloud services and data spaces in Europe and beyond. As such, it will also enable the creation and co-creation of innovative digital services in the public sector. With regards to the second area, connectivity, the level of 5G broadband and internet connections prioritization varies significantly across the member state resilience plans, with Germany having the most ambitious commitment to achieve a complete coverage by 2026. However, connectivity is the foundation of the digital landscape. Broadband connection is a prerequisite for home working or schooling, but obviously for accessing online public sector services. It is also a precondition for social inclusion. Let's not forget that 40% of people in rural areas in Europe do not yet have access to fast broadband connection. So achieving the full coverage should be an integral part of the digital transformation plans of the EU member states. Likewise, the upskill and reskilling of national workforce is another key success factor for a digital society. ICT specialists are the drivers of the data economy. They are those who will extract the value out of the data to develop innovative applications and services. Nevertheless, while it was great to hear that public sector transformation was really part of the plans that have been submitted by the member states, according to a Deloitte analysis of 12 national resilience plans, member states' planned investment in digital skills will only lead to 58% of EU adults having basic digital skills by 2030, far off the target that has been set by the European Commission in its digital compass, which is set at 80%. The gap is even bigger when it comes to the 20 million ICT specialist target, as only half of the 12 analyzed recovery plans allocate any funding to meet that objective. That is really concerning, and while digital technologies can bring enormous benefit to the public sector, we won't be able to reap the benefits if we don't prepare the workforce for the digital age. Finally, our conviction is that the government's digital transformation relies on EU cross-country collaboration as much as on national ambitions. Think of the Euro HPC joint undertaking. Since its creation, it has channeled strategic investments in high-performance computing. HPE is honored to have been selected to be LUMI, Europe's first pre-exascale supercomputer, which will rank amongst the most competitive and green supercomputer in the world. From speech recognition to future weed development or sustainable battery production, LUMI will enable innovation across many sectors, including public sector. Let's take the example of healthcare. Healthcare expenditure amounts to about 10% of GDP in Europe, with 15 million citizens being employed in health occupation in Europe as the end of 2019. HP is partnering with the CSC, LUMI's hosting center based in Kajaani, Finland, on a use case where LUMI would act as a compute platform for trusted anonymized patient data sharing amongst Finnish hospitals and research organizations. This would advance scientific research and reduce the financial burden on the Finnish healthcare system. But beyond Finland, LUMI's capabilities will be accessible to 9 other countries. The 145 million euros investment needed for this world-class system would never have been possible without these 10 countries' joint financial contribution. Scale in digital innovation investment and solution interoperability will be crucial for each single EU government to deliver on their transformation plans. As a conclusion, and according to J. Scott Marcus from the Bruggen Institute, the EU recovery plan is not just an economic stimulus, but an historic opportunity to correct some of the European society deficit in the key areas of digitalization and green sustainability. Thanks to the recovery instrument, Europe can come out of the crisis stronger than ever. Public sector is a key contributor to Europe's digital success as a policymaker, as well as a user of digital and sustainable solutions. At HPE, we committed to keep helping our public customers with a digital transformation. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a very insightful event. Back to you, Irena.
Thank you so much, Gilles. And here are some really interesting points that we will further unpack in the first panel today. You highlighted the importance of the secure data sharing, and clearly it is absolute top priority of Commissioner Breton to extract the value of the industrial data in Europe. And in fact, we will have the honor of having the CEO of the GAIA-X Foundation to specifically discuss this topic. And as to skills, again, we have some European cloud service providers later on today with us that I'm sure will have quite some thoughts on whether or not our workforce is ready for the future in Europe. Thank you, Gilles. Always incredibly insightful. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And now we will move on to the last part of our scene setting, let's say, part of our event. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the stage the Slovenian Minister Boštjan Koritnik, Minister for Public Administration of Slovenia. So Slovenia is currently holding the presidency of the European Union. And as Italian Slovenian, I can't hide it that I'm incredibly proud of having you here and of the work that Slovenia has done during the presidency. Minister Koritnik, zelo nas veseli, da ste tukaj z nami danes. So I would maybe give you the floor immediately to present a bit the vision of the Council, and how the entire work around the RRF was going during the presidency. What is your vision and how do you see this is going to help the European economy? And then later on, I might ask you a specific question on Slovenia and how about the Slovenian national plan. Minister Koritnik, the floor is all yours.
Distinguished guests, dear participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, today the world is changing very fast and the future is quite unpredictable, unfortunately. And in a fast-changing world, the public sector must also change to respond to the demands, to challenges, and of course to the ambitions of citizens. Everyday citizens expect or experience excellent services from the private sector, and they expect the same from the public sector. So for the services of the public sector to be customer-focused, efficient, innovative, personalized, and enabled by technology. And therefore, public sector modernization is crucial for Europe's future. The Recovery and Resilience Facility will play an important role in helping Europe recover from the economic and social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will help make the EU economies and societies more resilient, and it will secure the green and digital transitions. We can see that digitalization of public services has been set very high on the agenda of all member states. The implementation of the RRF plans or process has already started in many member states. They have received 13% pre-financing disbursements for their national recovery and resilience plans, and they can assess the rest of the funds after successful completion of milestones and targets set in their national plans. And therefore, the recovery plans should be efficiently administrated and should reach the necessary results. Each member state should organize itself efficiently for our RRP implementation and should prevent that complexity of rules becomes an obstacle to achieving the main goals. There are several challenges, in particular for smaller states due to the size of their public administrations, and also some member states still haven't received approval for their plans. But overall, I am optimistic and believe the Europe's recovery process will be successfully implemented. With regard to Slovenia, in Slovenia, we've already begun with the Recovery and Resilience Facility implementation, and our aim is to use the recovery plan to stimulate the economic social, territorial cohesion in order to reach the pre-crisis level of economic growth. We will achieve this through the digital transformation of certain sectors of the economy and society, together with reduced administrative burdens and the greater openness and flexibility of our economy. One of the key activities is the digital transformation of the public administration and public sector. An investment package of 268 million euros provides 6 reforms. Firstly, efficient management of the digital transformation of public administration. Second is wider use of e-services of public administration. The third is establishment of a competence center and raising the level of digital literacy of civil servants, which is really important. Fourth is modernization of administrative processes. 5, strengthening cybersecurity, and last but not least, transition to a gigabit society. We are aware that this is important. It is important to use the recovery and resilience funds to overcome the critical shortcomings which were revealed during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the end, I would like to say that I am glad that the European Union has ambitious objectives for its digital transformation by 2030. If I may name few of them, 100% of key public services provided online and accessible to citizens and businesses, 100% of citizens having access to medical records, gigabit for everyone, 5G everywhere, and at least 80% of EU citizens with basic digital skills and using digital ID. I'm convinced that thanks to the incentives like resilient funds, these objectives will be easier to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Korytnik. And I think that one thing that is really encouraging to hear, as you said, that in the Council you really saw that public sector digitization is really high on the Member States' agenda. And since Christiane was really elaborating on how it can be, the public sector administration modernization can be a driving force for the modernization of the rest of the economy. So it's very encouraging to hear that this is indeed really a point of focus. And maybe just one follow-up question I would like to ask you. So obviously the RRF requires 20% to be spent on digital and 30% on the green transition. And Christiane was mentioning that some of the member states were already putting on the table even more than 20% for the public sector modernization. And I believe Slovenia, from the data I've seen, is one of them. I was just curious to hear if you feel there is an understanding when you had to build your own national plan. Is there a good understanding out there that digitizing public sector is really critical? Or do you think we need to do a lot of work to build further awareness of how this can be a critical driving force of change for the broader economy?
Well, thank you for the question, which is indeed a very good one. I must say that I often personally meet with people who are in the driving seat of change and don't trust anything which cannot be touched. You know, they have a problem with investments into smart solutions. If they don't see the pipes and the buildings, they don't find it appealing, if I may say so. So your question is real good in that we need to persuade people that, of course, technology is something that a lot of people is afraid of. You know, we are all in the comfort zone, and we like to see what we already know. Every change is a stressful event. We have to be aware that we're not endangered by the technology. Technology is something that we need to use to our advantage. I read information a couple of days ago that there are more smartphones in the world than there are toothbrushes. Maybe that's something that says a lot about our mouth hygiene, but still, this is the state of our society in which we are, and we have to try to make this 5.0 revolution already to go into non-tangible things and not tangible solutions for our development. So we need to change this mindset, which is still very much apparent, also on the higher levels with the decision makers, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point, because obviously myself, I'm working in the tech sector since over 15 years, and for us it may sound obvious that digital will create the efficiencies that you mentioned, the re-engineering of the process in the public sector that will save costs, will save time, will deliver a better service, as you said, that the citizens are expecting. But probably we need to always be conscious that we're probably in a bubble, and there is a broader society there that still needs this awareness type of work being done. So with that, Minister Korytnik, I would really like to thank you for your insights, for being with us, and really wish you a lot of success in what is left of the Slovenian presidency, and then obviously for your leadership role in innovation in Slovenia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. So with this, we have now concluded our scene-setting part of our event. So the idea here was really to give everybody, especially because we have a lot of guests from outside the EU, to understand what are the financial envelopes, what is the vision, and what is the plan of deployment for this funding. We will now have a short pause. We will start with panel 1 at 10:40, so in 13 minutes from now. The panel 1, as I previously said, will start going really into the details of how the architecture and the data sharing could or should be shaped up in Europe to really untap the potential of the industrial data in the EU. In this first panel, we will have with us the CEO of the Gaia X Foundation, Francesco Bonfiglio, along with experts from the industry, and we will hear about some first use cases on data spaces for public administration. Thank you for being with us, and we'll join you again. We'll see you again in 12 minutes for panel 1. Thank you.